Welcome back to another Division 2 upload. It's LtBuzzLitebeer, and today we are discussing the new exotic weapons introduced in Title Update 10. But before we begin the review, if you haven't yet smashed that sub button for deep dive Division content, please do so, and don't forget to click on the bell icon to receive all notifications from my YouTube channel. Alright, let's begin. So the PTS for Title Update 10 went live on Friday, the 22nd on PC, and with it a huge amount of changes to skills, gear, and weaponry. Now also included with the PTS are 3 new exotic weapons for testing purposes, and we will be taking a look at all 3 in this video. So first up is the Mantis marksman rifle, and of the 3 of these exotic weapons, this is the only one that is not tied to Operation Iron Horse. The Mantis is based off of the Desert Tech Covert SRS, short for Stealth Recon Scout, and this is a bullpup designed rifle, so the overall length is quite short for marksman rifles, and I found that the overall handling of this weapon is quite easy. Now with my shade watch completely leveled up in reload speed, the Mantis reloads in 2.7 seconds. Agents should be familiar with the slightly longer big brother of the Mantis, the SRS-A1, as we have seen it available for looting or crafting since the Division 2 launched. Now, of all the bolt-action marksman rifles in this game, the SRS rifles have the weakest base damage of 339,000 before mods and gear. Now in comparison, the Nemesis has a base damage of 846,000 before mods and gear, so you can see there is a large variance between these two marksman rifles. Being an exotic weapon, the Mantis comes with presets already in place for stats and mods. It fires at 60 RPM and has a magazine size of 7, along with a 35% headshot damage scope, 10% reload speed magazine, 10% stability underbarrel mod, and a 7% headshot damage suppressor. The unique weapon talent for the Mantis is called In Plain Sight, and it has a rather lengthy text of, "Your scoped view displays additional information about enemies not targeting you. Headshot and weak point damage against enemies not targeting you amplified by 50%. Headshot kills reset the cooldown of the decoy skill. This bonus will wait until the decoy goes on cooldown if currently active." So the idea behind using and equipping the Mantis is that you want to pair it with the decoy skill. Once you have it deployed, the enemies will focus their attention towards it and leave you alone to hopefully land headshots. Now you will know if they were targeting you by the difference in the targeting reticle around your target's heads. If the circle around their heads has very thin yellow lines, the NPC is not targeting you. If your target has the much thicker nuclear symbol that is red around their heads, they are targeting you, and that is how you can acquire targets to better manage the 50% amp damage application. If you land a headshot against a target that is currently not targeting you, the damage of that shot is amped by 50%, and remember that amp damage is multiplicative, and therefore stronger than just normal weapon damage. Once you land a headshot kill, the decoy cooldowns will reset, and then you rinse and repeat the steps over again. My first impressions of the Mantis are somewhat mixed. I really like the snappy handling and quick reload speeds, but the base damage of the SRS is the lowest of any of the bolt-action marksman rifles in the game. Fully spec'd into headshot damage and using the decoy to draw NPC aggression away from me, I was consistently hitting headshots just into the lower 20 million range, which sounds like a lot, but using this exact same build, my Nemesis was pushing out nearly 10 to 12 million more per shot. For testing, I even crafted a classic M44, and that weapon with swap speed and the killer weapon talent was able to match the Mantis for sheer damage output. Overall, I like the concept of the interplay between the decoy skill and the amp damage that the Mantis can acquire. Handling is a plus with this rifle, and I found that the only negative to using the Mantis was its weak base damage in comparison to other marksman rifles. The Regulus pistol is based on the Smith & Wesson 6.86 Magnum Plus, chambered in .357, and fans of heavy-hitting revolvers will enjoy using this exotic. As with all heavy-hitting sidearms, the Regulus will wander from side to side after each shot and will require you to be vigilant with your aim. Now with my shade watch fully leveled into reload speed, the Regulus reloads in just 1.5 seconds, and that ties it with the other exotic sidearm, the Liberty, for reload speed. Now, both the Regulus and the Liberty push out high base damage and are very similar in output, with the Regulus at 282,000 and the Liberty at 235,000, while the Liberty holds a slight advantage in rate of fire. Besides using a sawed-off double-barrel shotgun as your sidearm, the Regulus is the next hardest-hitting sidearm that will be in the game come TU10. Reviewing over the preset stats and mods for the Regulus yields us an RPM of 160 and a capacity of 6 rounds. Now, being a revolver, mods are reduced to just 2, with those being a 10% reload speed drum and a 5% critical hit damage muzzle. The weapon talent for the Regulus is called Regicide, and it reads as follows. Headshot kills create a 5-meter explosion, dealing 400% weapon damage and applying bleed to all enemies hit. I paired the Regulus with my True Patriot tank shield build for some quick clips, and I pushed against the enemy targets. Using a strategy of continuing to advance and aim for headshots, the Regulus pushes out impressive damage. Once the killing blow is landed via headshot, the explosions deal enough damage to seriously hurt or kill NPCs that are caught in the blast radius and have already been wounded. The item to focus on in the weapon lore text is the weapon damage that is spread to targets, and in that, you will see impressive damage figures. I also found that the bleed status effect that applies to enemies that are hit is strong, but not overpowering. First impressions of the Regulus, and I was pleased to see an exotic sidearm designed to damage targets versus heal our skills, and the Regulus can push out some serious damage. Handling is a mixed bag, as the weapon itself jumps from side to side after each shot and really requires that you stay on top of it and constantly readjusting back to dead center. Now, as with all sidearms, swap and reload speeds are blazing fast. And I also had to adjust to the newer reticle design for the Regulus, as it has a single point and vertical lines added to our normal sidearm aiming reticle. My overall impressions of the Regulus are consistently favorable across the board. It hits extremely hard, reloads quickly, and as long as you can monitor your rate of fire and balance it, keeping it on target, it does the job. Once you proc Regicide within a mob, the fun begins, as the weapon really has its own internal version of creeping death that applies weapon damage to enemies along with a bleed status effect. The third and final exotic weapon is the Ravenous rifle, and by far, this is the coolest looking exotic coming in TU10. The Ravenous is based off of the real-world Gilboa Snake double-barrel AR-15 rifle, and the engraved artwork on this weapon is really exquisite. Handling is quite good overall, and there is very little recoil along with no side-to-side chattering. Again, with my shade watch completely maxed into reload speed, the Ravenous reloads extremely quickly at just 2 seconds. There is no in-game non-exotic rifle currently in the game to base the Ravenous off of, but in comparisons to other rifles, it features a base damage similar to that of the MK17 and roughly half of that of the classic M1A. Preset stats and mods include an RPM of 240 and a magazine of 60. Mods include a 5% critical hit chance optic, 10% reload speed magazine, 10% stability grip, and 5% critical hit damage muzzle. The unique weapon talent for the Ravenous rifle is entitled Gary and Fracky and has an extremely lengthy text of, on trigger pull, fire both barrels at once. When fired from the right shoulder, hits add offensive primers and defensive primers when fired from the left shoulder. Hits from one shoulder will detonate all of the opposite shoulder's primers when present. When detonated, each offensive primer deals 100% weapon damage, while each defensive primer grants 4% bonus armor and 10% amplified damage to armor plates for 5 seconds. Primer effectiveness is doubled at 10 stacks. Now, in order to use this rifle effectively, you will need to monitor which shoulder you are firing from. Aim down the sights and fire from the right shoulder to embed offensive primers into your target. Once you hit the maximum number of primers, switch to your left shoulder and fire a shot to detonate those primers and ignite them. Fire from the left shoulder to embed defensive primers that grant you 4% armor and amp damage versus armor plating, then switch to your right shoulder to detonate those primers and receive the bonuses. Now it all sounds like a lot of monitoring, and at first I found myself counting in my head how many primers I had landed and from which shoulder I had fired, but after a few minutes of using the Ravenous, it became almost second nature. Now, although base damage of this weapon is well behind that of the classic M1A, this weapon is not designed to work the same as the M1A. Now, whereas the M1A is a precision cannon from mid and long range, the Ravenous rifle is designed to be used in an assault style. As you move forwards firing from the 60-round magazine, you can instantly switch the weapon from shoulder to shoulder, building stacks and igniting them. Now, if used properly, the Ravenous will have all types of NPCs running for cover, as it can really push out some impressive damage, especially when you ignite a max stack of offensive primers. My overall impressions of the Ravenous are mostly positive, as it has introduced a new mechanic of shoulder switching for different primers. Functioning much like the Merciless did when it was first introduced to the game, the offensive primers can really inflict high damage on targets when ignited, and the defensive armor primers are also helpful. Amp damage versus armor is always welcome, and overall, the weapon was really quite easy to wield and fire. The only thing I had to adjust to was the horizontally expanding reticle dot, but that was more of a surprise than a hindrance. This is going to wrap up my brief overview and impressions of the 3 new exotics slated to appear in Title Update 10. I encourage you to leave your thoughts and feedback in the comment section below. If you haven't yet smashed that sub button, please do so, and don't forget to click on the bell icon to receive all notifications from my YouTube channel. If you liked the video, rate it with a thumbs up, if not, with a thumbs down. If you want to support my full-time YouTube content creation, check in the video description for links to my Patreon and Teespring merchandise stores. Follow me on Twitter for all my latest thoughts concerning most things gaming related, with a heavy emphasis on the Division franchise. And until next time, this is LtBuzzLitebeer, signing off.